Have you ever felt your heart skip a beat or fall out of rhythm, a heaviness in your chest, and you tell yourself, it'll pass, but what if it doesn't? Today, we're going to talk about 5 warning signs when you shouldn't wait. You should call an ambulance right away. This information could save your life or the life of someone you love. It's simple, no scary terms, just what really matters, because you deserve to live with peace of mind, knowing you can recognize danger in time. Let's start with the first and perhaps most crucial sign, the kind of chest pain you should never try to wait out. I've seen it many times. Someone feels a strange pressure in their chest, maybe like something heavy is sitting there, and they tell themselves it's probably indigestion or just stress. But here's the truth. Persistent chest discomfort, especially one that lasts more than 5 minutes and doesn't improve with rest, can be a sign of a heart attack. And in older adults, it doesn't always come with dramatic symptoms. Sometimes it's a quiet warning, a tightening, a dull ache, a sense of pressure. As we age, our heart tissue becomes more sensitive to strain, and the body might not send signals as strongly or as clearly as it once did. That's why it's so important to listen to the quieter signs and not brush them off. I remember a man named William. He was 72, a retired school bus driver from Indiana. He came into the ER one evening after waiting almost 3 hours to call 911. He told me he'd been at the grocery store, loading bags into the trunk of his car when he felt this heavy, uncomfortable sensation in the center of his chest. He said it wasn't sharp or stabbing, just this pressure that made him stop and catch his breath. He thought maybe he was just tired or dehydrated. He went home, sat down, drank some water, even took a pain pill. But the feeling didn't go away. His wife finally insisted on calling the ambulance. By the time he arrived, his EKG showed he was in the middle of a heart attack. We treated him, and thankfully he recovered, but I'll never forget what he said afterward. I thought I was being dramatic. That sentence stayed with me. Another woman, Lorraine, 76, from Jacksonville, told me she had chest pressure during her morning walk, but didn't want to make a fuss. Her daughter happened to call and noticed her breathlessness over the phone. She called 911 on her behalf. That likely saved her life. These are not dramatic people. They're thoughtful, strong, and used to pushing through. But the heart doesn't care how polite or patient we are. It just sends signals and hopes we listen. So here's what I tell every one of my patients. If you feel chest pain or pressure that doesn't go away within 5 minutes, especially if it spreads to your arm, jaw, or back, or if you feel sweaty, nauseated, or dizzy, call 911. Don't wait to see if it goes away. Don't try to drive yourself. Don't assume it's nothing. If it turns out to be a false alarm, no one will be upset. That's a good thing. But if it is something serious, that phone call can make all the difference. Your heart can't wait, and you don't have to either. And I want to leave you with this thought. Your life is not only valuable, it's irreplaceable. You've lived through decades of experience, love, hardship, and wisdom. You are not here to suffer in silence or downplay your own needs. Even the smallest decision, like calling for help, can open the door to more time with your family, more mornings with your favorite coffee, more stories to share. You deserve that. You have the right to be cared for. Here's another critical sign I want you to remember. When one side of your body suddenly goes weak or numb. Sometimes it starts in the arm or leg, or maybe your face feels off, like your smile isn't quite right. In people over 60, these signs are often brushed off as a pinched nerve or low blood sugar. But when something like this happens suddenly and doesn't go away quickly, especially if it's combined with slurred speech or confusion, it can mean a stroke is happening. And with a stroke, every minute matters. The older we get, the more our blood vessels can narrow or become blocked, and if the brain doesn't get oxygen, even for a short time, it can start to lose function. You may not feel pain, and that's what makes it so dangerous. That's why I always tell people your brain can't send you pain the way your foot or stomach can, so you have to learn to recognize its quieter cries for help. A few years ago, I had a patient named Judy, 68 years old, from Ohio, who was spending the afternoon with her granddaughter. They were playing a card game at the kitchen table when Judy suddenly started fumbling with her cards. Her granddaughter noticed she wasn't holding them right. Her right hand had gone limp. Judy laughed it off and said maybe she'd slept on it wrong. But then when she spoke, her words came out a little slow and soft, and her face looked just slightly uneven. Nothing too dramatic, just enough to seem a little off. Her granddaughter, just 12 years old, remembered seeing a poster at school that said, "If someone's face droops, call 911." And she did exactly that. The paramedics got there in 12 minutes. It was an ischemic stroke, and because they acted quickly, the doctors were able to give Judy the right treatment fast enough to prevent serious damage. She made a full recovery. I've also seen the opposite happen. A man named Carl, 74, who waited nearly an hour before telling his wife that he couldn't lift his coffee mug properly. By the time he arrived at the hospital, the damage had spread. He survived, but the recovery was harder and slower, and he still struggles with balance. I share both stories not to scare you, but to show you how powerful that one decision to call for help quickly can be. One of the simplest ways to remember what to do is this. If your face suddenly droops, if your arm or leg feels weak or numb, or if your speech sounds strange or slurred, don't wait to see if it passes. Don't lie down or take an aspirin. Call 911 right away. Tell the operator what you're seeing and how quickly it started. Emergency teams know how to act fast with stroke symptoms, but they need you to make that first call. It's not about guessing, it's about responding. Please remember, your safety is not a burden. You don't have to be 100% sure before you ask for help. You've spent your life helping others, raising families, working hard, showing up. Now it's your turn to be cared for just as well. Even a small moment of hesitation can change everything, but a small moment of action, it can give you your life back. You deserve that, fully and completely. Another sign I want you to take seriously is when breathing suddenly becomes difficult or feels different than usual. I know that many older adults live with some level of shortness of breath, maybe from asthma, heart issues, or chronic conditions like COPD, so when something feels off, it's easy to think it's just a bad day or the weather. But here's what matters. If breathing becomes hard all of a sudden, or if it gets worse even when you're sitting still, that's not something to ignore. As we age, our lungs lose elasticity and our heart becomes more sensitive to strain. That means shortness of breath can be an early sign of serious conditions like a heart attack, a pulmonary embolism, or even pneumonia. And often it comes with other signals like cold sweats, lightheadedness, or just a deep sense that something isn't right. If you're ever unsure, I'd rather you call and be told it's nothing than wait, and be told it's too late. I once worked with a gentleman named Robert, 76 years old, from St. Louis. He had asthma for most of his adult life, and he knew his inhaler routine like the back of his hand. But one afternoon he was helping his wife move some boxes in the garage, and he suddenly felt like he couldn't get a full breath. He used his inhaler once, then again a few minutes later. No real relief. He sat down, thinking maybe it would pass, but the sensation only grew tighter in his chest, and a cold sweat broke out on his forehead. His wife said his lips looked pale. Now, Robert is the kind of man who doesn't like to make a fuss, but thankfully his wife didn't wait for him to ask. She called 911 immediately. He was diagnosed with a pulmonary embolism, a blood clot in the lung, something that can be fatal if not treated quickly. Another patient I remember, Lorraine, 69, from Phoenix, had been recovering from a mild case of COVID when she started feeling short of breath watching TV, not even moving. She assumed it was anxiety, but when her daughter checked her oxygen level with a home monitor, it was dangerously low. They got her to the hospital just in time for treatment. What both cases have in common is that the decision to act, not wait, made all the difference. One of the easiest ways to think about this is simple. If breathing becomes hard, especially if you're not moving and you feel dizzy, sweaty, or scared without a clear reason, it's time to call 911. Trust that signal. If it feels different than your usual breathing issues, or if it's the first time it's ever happened, don't wait for it to go away. It might be something treatable if caught quickly. Let the professionals figure it out. That's what we're here for. You are not weak for needing help. You are wise for recognizing when your body is asking for it. Breathing is life, and you deserve to protect it just as much as anyone else. There is no medal for suffering in silence, but there is strength in speaking up. Even one breath that feels wrong is worth the call because you're worth every breath you take. Here's another sign that absolutely shouldn't be ignored, even if it feels like nothing at all at the time. And that's passing out even for just a few seconds. Fainting, or what we call a brief loss of consciousness, is something many people try to brush off, especially older adults who've had it happen once or twice in the past. I often hear things like, "I just got up too fast," or "it was probably the heat." But in people over 60, a fainting episode isn't always something simple. It can be a sign of something much more serious, like a sudden drop in blood pressure, heart rhythm issues, blood sugar changes, or even neurological conditions. As we age, the body doesn't compensate as quickly for stress, heat, dehydration, or standing up too fast. And when fainting occurs, it means something interrupted blood flow to the brain, and that always deserves attention. It might pass quickly, but it can also be the only warning you get before something worse happens. One of my patients, Margaret, 80 years old, from Kansas City, was cooking breakfast when she suddenly found herself on the floor. She hadn't felt dizzy beforehand, and she didn't hit her head, so when she came to, she told herself she probably just got overwhelmed or stood too long. She didn't mention it to her daughter, didn't call anyone. But thankfully her neighbor, who'd stopped by to bring eggs, noticed she seemed off and asked what had happened. When Margaret explained it, her neighbor insisted they call for help. In the ER, we discovered she had intermittent bradycardia, periods where her heart slowed down too much, cutting off blood flow just long enough to knock her out. She ended up needing a pacemaker. Another man I met, Paul, 73, fainted at church and woke up thinking it was low blood sugar, but testing showed it was actually a sudden arrhythmia related to a new medication he'd started 2 weeks earlier. Both Margaret and Paul were lucky. They were surrounded by people who didn't downplay what had happened. I tell you this not to scare you, but to make one thing clear. If you lose consciousness, your body is sending a signal you should never ignore. What often helps in these moments is very simple. If you faint, even once, call your doctor. Or, better yet, go to the ER. And if someone else sees it happen, don't let them talk you out of getting help. I know it feels like making a fuss, but it's not. It's being wise. Especially if you take blood pressure medication, heart medication, or have diabetes, that moment matters. Let professionals figure out what caused it, so you can prevent something worse later on. Please remember, fainting isn't weakness, it's a message. And when you choose to listen to your body with care, that's not fear talking, it's strength. Even one quiet signal answered with action can protect your independence, your safety, and your peace of mind. You're not bothering anyone by taking care of yourself. You're doing exactly what someone strong and self-respecting would do. One more sign I'd like you to remember is when you suddenly feel dizzy or unsteady, not the kind that comes from standing up too quickly, but a wave of imbalance that feels unfamiliar or even scary. This kind of dizziness can happen to anyone, but in people over 60, it's often a warning sign the body is sending about something more serious. As we get older, our sense of balance naturally changes, and so does how our brain and ears communicate. But sudden, intense dizziness, especially if it's paired with blurred vision, nausea, or trouble walking straight, can be a sign of a stroke or a problem with blood flow to the brain. And unfortunately, many people shrug it off as dehydration or fatigue. That delay can cost precious time. If something like this happens to you or someone near you, I want you to feel confident in taking it seriously and calling for help. I still remember a man named George, 74 years old, from a quiet neighborhood in Pennsylvania. He was just stepping outside to check the mailbox, something he'd done every morning for 20 years, when he suddenly felt like the ground beneath him was tilting. He said it was as if the world shifted sideways. He tried to grab the railing, but everything spun and he fell before he could steady himself. He didn't hit his head badly, thankfully, but he was disoriented, and by the time his daughter came outside, she knew something was wrong. She called 911, and that decision may have saved his life. George was having a stroke in the back part of his brain, what we call a posterior stroke, and those often show up with balance issues or dizziness rather than slurred speech or facial drooping. I've also seen cases like Barbara, 69, who thought her vertigo was due to an ear infection. But when she couldn't walk a straight line and her speech got muddy, her husband got her to the ER just in time. The brain has many ways of telling us it needs help, and not all of them are loud. What often helps in these situations is keeping a simple rule in mind. If dizziness comes on suddenly and strongly, especially if it makes you feel like you're spinning, off balance, or unable to walk steadily, call 911. If it's accompanied by nausea, confusion, blurred vision, or trouble speaking, do not wait to see if it passes. Let emergency responders check you. Even if it turns out to be something less serious, it's better to be sure. Strokes affecting balance can be tricky, but they are treatable if caught quickly. And I'll leave you with this thought. You should never feel afraid to do something as ordinary as stepping outside for the mail. Your body may send you subtle warnings, and the strongest thing you can do is listen. Your steadiness in life isn't measured by how often you stand without falling. It's in how quickly you act when something doesn't feel right. You deserve to move through life safely and confidently, and help is always just one phone call away. If even one of these signs feels familiar, tell us in the comments what stood out to you. We read everything. Subscribe and hit the bell so you won't miss helpful, heartfelt advice made just for you. And remember, you are not alone. You're stronger than you think. Life keeps going when you hold it gently in your hand.